Older processors such as the i7-4790K are gaining popularity once again. This processor was part of the 4th generation Devil's Canyon release. That makes things a bit more complicated, as it's compatible with several different chipsets and motherboards. Subsequently, finding the best motherboard for the 4790K can prove to be a bit of a challenge. After extensive research, we landed on 5 of the best motherboards for the i7-4790K. To create this detailed guide, there were several things that needed to be considered. First off, we need to concern ourselves with the processor we're talking about. In our case, it's the 4790K. Since this is a processor that happens to be several generations old, things get a bit more complicated than they need to be. For example, the Devil's Canyon processor is part of the Haswell refresh CPUs. While it was largely an underwhelming launch, unlocked processors are quite interesting. All of that means that the 4790K is the flagship processor from that generation, but uses the same LGA 1150 socket. The LGA 1150 socket is supported by several different chipsets and motherboards. At launch, the only obvious pairing for the 4790K was a Z97 motherboard. While that still largely remains the same, some H97 and H87 motherboards still work well with the 4790K. Note that the H series for this processor doesn't support overclocking and lacks NVIDIA SLI and AMD Crossfire support. There are other chipsets such as the B85, the Q85, and the Q87. However, these motherboards were developed for businesses and are hard to find. In the end, we're left with the Z97, H97, and H87 choices. A lot of the motherboards on our list support overclocking, so you can get the most performance out of this iconic processor. We also want to focus on other parameters such as value, design, connectivity, network features, and more. We score motherboards on these individual categories, then give them an average rating. The boards are then ranked according to these ratings. We also award motherboards based on the different aspects in which they stand out. With all that said, let's take a look at the roundup. Price information and all motherboards mentioned in the video are available in the description. Number 5. ASRock Z97M Pro 4. Let's take a look at a micro ATX motherboard. This capable performer from ASRock represents a bargain that's too hard to ignore. If you're looking for a step up from entry-level Z-series motherboards and don't mind the micro ATX form factor, this is a great motherboard to go with. At the manufacturer's suggested retail price, which is even lower these days, this motherboard is quite wallet-friendly. Of course, that does still come at a cost. We'll go over those so that you can scroll past without wasting time. It lacks an M2 slot, there's no support for SATA Express, and it does not feature SLI support as well. Now, that is substantial, but for the price, we can't count them as cons. This is because people buying this motherboard simply won't be bothered by those things. Since the M2 slot on the Z97 is limited by slower speeds, it's impractical to buy an M2 drive. SATA Express is great, but most people won't benefit much just from gaming. SLI itself is an outdated feature, and most games lack support for it these days. What you're left with is a board that nails the fundamentals. You get a capable 4-phase VRM design, which is still decent for overclocking, despite what you may initially think. You even get a USB 3.1 Gen 1 header, 4 USB 3.1 Gen 1 ports, and 2 USB 2 ports. The software suite is also great, and this is a feature we miss from previous generation motherboards today. All in all, we get a motherboard that's great for the price. Where it lacks in features, it makes up for in its excellent pricing. It also looks quite good, thanks to the mostly black PCB and blue heatsinks that accent it beautifully. And to sum it up, we like the appealing and competitive price. It is small and compact, it's decent in terms of overclocking, and the Thunderbolt is a great addition. On the downside, the BIOS could be a bit better, and it's not as sturdy as competitors. Our rating for VRM design is 8 out of 10. Aesthetics is 8 out of 10. Connectivity is 7 out of 10. Value for your money is 9 out of 10. For an overall rating of 8 out of 10. Number 4. Gigabyte GA Z97X Gaming 5. It's crucial to remember that the Devil's Canyon 4790K is an unlocked processor. This means that it can be overclocked, and it does that quite well. Well, if your main focus is overclocking and performance in games, you can't get much better than the Gigabyte GA Z97X Gaming 5. It's the best overclocking motherboard for i7-4790K, no doubt about that. The Z97X Gaming 5 is certainly an interesting offering from Gigabyte. It is a bit lower in the product line, slotting behind the Gaming 7 option. The latter offers more hardware switches and a few gold-plated connections. The Gaming 5 is nearly identical, so it makes the other option look like a bad value. Once the company's product makes its own offering look impractical, you can rest easy knowing it's a quality board. Well, what makes this such a great offering? The first thing is the design. This board features an all-black PCB with red heatsinks. The Gigabyte logos and G1 Gaming branding add some personality to the aesthetic. It looks just as good now as it did back in 2014. If you can find it in good condition, it's a fantastic looking board. It's also quite overkill in terms of overclocking. The VRM design is excellent, and paired with the comprehensive software, makes it easy to play around with. Memory overclocking is quite great as well, and that allows you to push the processor to its limits. It proves to be a great motherboard for people who want maximum performance while gaming. That's not all there is to it. This motherboard provides a great feature set. For example, you get killer NIC for Ethernet, a built-in amplifier for the sound, comprehensive software, easy to manage BIOS, and a lot of hardware buttons. All of that is what makes this an excellent premium board. To sum it up, we like the premium selection of enthusiast features. The built-in audio amplifier is great, arguably the best overclocking support, and the comprehensive software suite. On the downside, it's quite expensive, and it lacks Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Our rating for VRM design is 9 out of 10. Aesthetics is 9 out of 10. Connectivity is 9 out of 10. Value for your money, 7.5 out of 10. For an overall rating of 8.6 out of 10. Number 3. Asus Z97AATX. Asus A series of motherboards have always embodied the message of the word value. That's where the Z97A shines. While it comes at a very affordable price, it doesn't skimp out on many features at all. That's why we have decided to award it as the best budget Z97 motherboard on the market. Before we talk about the many positives of this board, there is an obvious aspect that needs to be addressed. As you can see for yourselves, the design of the board is quite outlandish. It features a brown PCB with gold copper heatsinks for the VRM and chipset. While this might have looked fresh in 2014, it sticks out in an undesirable way today. Fortunately, that minuscule negative for this motherboard is limited to just the look of the motherboard. Functionally, the design is quite good. You have M2 support, excellent SATA Express support, Gigabit Ethernet, 6 USB 3.0 ports, and an excellent audio codec. The maximum memory support is 32 gigs, and you can overclock that to 3200 megahertz. Furthermore, you get an impressive 8-phase VRM design for the CPU. This allows you to access decent overclocking on a budget motherboard. The combination of the memory and the CPU overclocking support alone makes this an excellent budget motherboard. You even get access to AI Suite 3 and physical hardware buttons on the board, so you don't need to enter the BIOS as often. All that comes together to make this an excellent Z97 motherboard on a budget. To sum up the pros of the Asus Z97A are the impressive fan connectivity and controls. It's power efficient at idle and full load. It has lots of features for a low price. The BIOS is ready for tweaking, and it includes many physical hardware switches. On the downside, the design language is unappealing. Our rating for VRM design is 9 out of 10. Aesthetics is 9 out of 10. Connectivity is 8 out of 10. Value for your money is 9 out of 10 for an overall rating, 8.75 out of 10. Number 2. MSI Z97 Gaming 5. The Gaming 5 is a part of MSI's Z97 lineup, all of which are mostly high-end. However, the combination of excellent overclocking, phenomenal audio, and robust feature set for gamers make this arguably the best high-end motherboard for a processor like the i7 4790K. Instead of talking about the design first, let's cover the box content for a change. There's a lot to cover here. Apart from the usual guides, manuals, and SATA cables, you get a branded SLI bridge, an MSI branded case badge, a SATA label kit, and an audio power cable. The I/O shield included goes perfectly with MSI's aesthetic for this motherboard. Speaking of which, this is one of the better looking Z97 motherboards. The heatsink design is quite different, and they feature the dragon logo. Protruding from the sides, the red metal pieces imitate the look of a dragon's scale, or claws. Great attention to detail there. M2 also makes an appearance, accompanied by a dual-digit error code display. The fan controls are handled by a Super I/O chip, and the accompanying software with it works excellently. Tuning performance, measuring overclock stability, and controlling fans is a breeze. Finally, let's go over the performance briefly. You get support for 32 gigs of RAM, that can be overclocked to 3000 MHz and beyond. You can achieve 3300 MHz speeds with a bit of tinkering in the BIOS. CPU overclocking is also splendid, as you can easily get a processor like the 4790K to 4.7 GHz or more. That's more than enough to provide a performance increment in gaming. Other features here include an intuitive BIOS screen, high-end killer Gigabit Ethernet, 6 USB 3.0 ports, high-end audio with great post-processing software, excellent fan control, and a comprehensive command center. The only downside here is that it costs a bit more than comparable Z97 motherboards. With that said, it also outperforms most of them. To sum up what we like, the impressive selection of gaming features, the excellent fan connectivity and control, the surprisingly competent audio output, the software suite works well, and the BIOS is catered towards enthusiasts. On the downside, as we mentioned, the price is still a bit much. Our rating for VRM design is 9 out of 10. For aesthetics is 9 out of 10. Connectivity, 9 out of 10. Value for your money is 8 out of 10. Your overall rating is 8.75 out of 10. Number 1. Asus ROG Maximus 7 Hero. The Asus ROG Maximus Hero 7 is our editor's choice motherboard for the i7-4790K. This is due to many factors, the main one being it focuses on excellent quality features to all gamers. It does not skimp out on anything, which is something both mainstream gamers and overclocking enthusiasts can appreciate. It features sophisticated design, despite the flashy red and black accents. It uses a matte black surface for the majority of the design, and this alone provides it with a premium look and feel. The area around the socket is minimal, and the heat sinks here are quite large. This helps with heat dissipation while overclocking. On the back, we can see that the MOSFETs are protected by backplates. Next up, let's cover performance quickly. This motherboard has excellent support for high-frequency memory. It supports 32 gigabytes of RAM at a max of 1600 megahertz, but most memory modules can be overclocked to over 3000 megahertz with ease. The 8+2 power phase design of the VRM is also excellent. On top of that, the heat sinks are quite large, so it performs impressively in terms of overclocking. Furthermore, you have access to 6 4-pin fan headers, a BIOS flashback button, optical audio, XMP support, and more. The inclusion of the AI Suite 3 is phenomenal as well. You can control the fan speed, tune the performance, and control almost all of the components from here. Such customization is rarely seen on previous generation boards, so this is a welcome addition. All in all, this motherboard easily takes the spot of our editor's choice. A combination of high-end components, premium performance, and excellent software suite make this arguably the best motherboard for a processor like the i7-4790K. Nevertheless, Wi-Fi support would have made this even better. To sum up what we like is that the Asus AI Suite 3 is a great software add-on. It works great in terms of overclocking. It supports high-frequency memory overclocking, the intuitive BIOS interface, and a great amount of features at a reasonable price. On the downside, the lack of Wi-Fi support is disappointing. Our rating for VRM Design is 9 out of 10. Aesthetics is 9 out of 10. Connectivity is 9 out of 10. Value for money is 9 out of 10, for an overall rating of 9 out of 10. Do you think another motherboard's better for the Intel Core i7-4790K? Tell us your opinion.